Hello, everyone. This is Ed Breniger, and this is the Eddie Network podcast. And my guest today is Mark McCarthy, and we are just getting to know one another, as many of these are. And Mark, welcome to the podcast, and tell us a little bit about yourself, and tell us about what you're passionate about in the work that you do.
Right. Well, thank you very much for having me, Ed, and for the invite as well. As you said, my name's Mark McCartney, and yeah, I guess I'm very passionate just about exploring the human experience, exploring what lies between us, like what connects us, how we relate to one another.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really intrigued by like developing or cultivating a sense of trust between ourselves, even for ourselves.
Yeah.
And then I guess opening ourselves up perhaps a little bit. Maybe this isn't so much my work, but maybe where my work is orienting towards. But maybe bringing a little bit more of enchantment to our lives, engaging more with mystery, the unknown, acknowledging the uncertainty that we exist within, like even from the point of view of like I'm intrigued by quantum physics, by spirituality, by ideas of God, whatever. Like just there's so many different areas in which I'm curious about. And even just the idea is something that fascinates me all the time is that we live in a universe of 95% dark energy and dark matter, which says we don't know what that is. And yet the certainty and I don't know, the narrow lanes of kind of our intellect and experience that we stay within without exploring the unknown.
We share a lot of different curiosities and interests there. The fact that the universe operates within such narrow boundaries of precision is, to me, fascinating. It's so big, and yet it's the degrees of difference that could cause catastrophe are so minute. It's just kind of amazing that anything functions well.
Yeah, well, I think it was in reading a book on chaos theory when I think it was Edward Lorenz in an MIT department where he was running a test on that was trying to predict a model of behavior that would come about, and he was trying to repeat the test again, but he only did it to the first 3 decimal places when he was doing it the second time based on the computer printout. And I was so fascinated by the fact that with just 12 variables put into a model, and just a difference between the third and the fourth decimal point place being the only difference in the two studies or the two models, and that just led to a colossal difference in the end result of a completely different weather forecast. And I'm not to say that, look, we agreed on a time here to talk to, right? And we had some degree of certainty or assuredness that we were both going to show up. So I'm not saying that everything exists within this in this layer of not knowing and uncertainty. But it also, I think, is really, I don't know, it's just really helpful, I think, even for the sake of my own humility or an acknowledgement of my own ignorance, to acknowledge that once we start stacking ideas on top of one another or predictions on top of one another, we really are entering a big realm of the unknown, even when we may feel quite sure in the models or the methods or the processes that we're kind of employing.
Maybe the starting point of the unknown is really knowing ourselves.
Yeah, which you know, I had an experience when I got to know my German wife in India about 8 years ago, and right off the cuff, we were very honest about why we were in India, what was going on in our lives that we were seeking to explore, and we just got right into it. And since then, I've told some friends that, oh yeah, when we talk, we're very open with what our personal or even our inner dialogue is, our inner experience of life. And a friend said to me, but does that not take the mystery out of it? And at that point, I kind of had to laugh because I'm like, Japers, like I'm still trying to figure out myself. And whether it's a whole series of different inquiries, whether it's reading certain things, writing, journaling, meditation, whatever it may be. Like I'm bit parts of me are being revealed to me with each new experience, like with each new day. I mentioned to you just at the start as well, being a father for 6 months. Like life is always presenting us with something new.
Yeah.
I think it's just our capacity if we can look at life with fresh eyes so that we can see it for the newness that it brings.
I think part of the issue, what we deal with, is that the age that we live in,
Yeah,
sort of at the end of the age of enlightenment, where we were supposed to be certain about everything.
yeah.
And 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 the older I get, it's not that I'm less certain. I'm just recognize that there's a higher degree of ambiguity about the certainties than, I mean, what I believe is still the same as what I believed 50 years ago, but I don't believe it with the same dogmatism that I believed in 50 years ago. That makes sense.
Um, this makes absolute sense. So, for example, I turned 40 towards the end of last year. In my 20s, I think I had a much more concise and clear idea as to what life was all about. Um, I don't think if I held onto that exact model, if you know what I mean, that I think my idea of my relationship with myself would have been a lot more unforgiving than what it presently is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just sometimes I really question, and I'm not looking to open up a rabbit hole around free will or something like that, but like there are also things there's so much that is potentially out of my control in terms of, look, just evolutionary biology. Just from the point of view of what my parents decided, like the culture I was born into, um, so many different aspects of this life that I wasn't in control of. And even just if I were to have a moment of pause or silence now, I'm not really in control of the next thought that's going to flash across my head or what I'm going to connect with next. And then even from the point of view of, like, let's say emotional states, like I don't know what state I'm going to wake up emotionally tomorrow. And I can do a series of behaviors that I think will probably contribute to a better outcome, sure. But I've done that and still had a woken up in a kind of a rough emotional state. I've woken up in a wonderful state too. But it's clear to me that there's something, I don't know, there's something in this life where it fascinates me to just contemplate, like, can I just be okay? Can I have the grace to handle what's arising as opposed to trying to figure it all out or to corner life or to solve life like a riddle? And I think, we often think of like a good life. Like I've started this project where I've interviewed 200 people now over the last 3 years around the question of what is a good life. And I think we often think of that like as in the first thought we have, it might be all these wonderful things that happen. But I think the more I talk to people for considerable chunks of time, like an hour at least each time to reflect on their life, it's also like stunningly obvious that some of our biggest hardships or adversity shaped us quite significantly in a way that maybe we can have some gratitude towards now when we've got enough distance from it and we've seen how things have turned out. But it's not like any of us would have signed up to some of the things that people have experienced without, without knowing how it was going to go. So it's like even this idea we're engaging with uncertainty all the time, and we don't know how it's going to play out. And so I think it's not about getting the desirable outcome all the time. It's like, can I have the courage or the grace to still look at what's actually happening or unfolding as it's unfolding, rather than just having a series of kind of lovely events play out.
Yeah, yeah, I see it in very similar ways, and I feel like that there is. It's not that nothing is certain. There are lots of things that are certain, but they're not certain in the sense that they're fixed and unchanging.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah.
not like a brick or a a rock or something, which is going to take a long time to break down. It's more like, well, this is the way I look at it. Everything that exists in relationship to us. And if we treat it as a relationship, then I'm going to respect that rock or that brick or that chair or that book or that bottle or whatever it may be. I'm going to respect that with openness for it. I'm not anthropomorphizing it. I'm not saying it has free will, but it's going to show me something about itself that is going to help me to better relate to it. But that comes from my being willing to be curious about it and to investigate it and to engage with it. And but to do that, we really are asking that we live in a constant state of transition, because we're always learning and we're always going to change because of what we're learning.
So this is a really interesting dynamic, I think, right? Because I think the reality is that we always are living in a state of transition. Just even breath in, breath out, or like my heart is beating. That's in transition. My cells are regenerating. All of this stuff is happening. Yet my mental model of life would find it very difficult to always update my beliefs, my values, all of these things on a kind of perpetual basis, or to keep up with a constant state of transition. Like as a human, I seem to need something to hold, somewhere like a wall to lean up against every so often to kind of handle all the change that's going on around us. So I think it's what you said there really resonates with me. And I think what happens sometimes when we get too stuck to our ideas or our interpretations of the world, of life, or even a person, that's when we come up against real difficulty, because we're holding on to this old model of what something is or could be, not observing what it actually is. And I think even if you think about relationships, sometimes where someone might take a great glee in telling you that they know why you did something because they've observed your behavior so many times. And while that may be true, what they may have observed can be true, but it also traps us from ever acknowledging each other's ability to
Right.
change.
Yeah.
And I guess we get great comfort, like when I'm just looking at things, if I'm looking at people, places, patterns, like I am trying to, my first go-to is probably to try to put a pre-existing pattern or something that I already know on top of what is a vibrant picture. But once again, that's not that there's so much that I'm missing out on in that. Like now, granted, I can't spend my whole day in a suspended state of ambiguity. So I think it's more even just cultivating pockets or the practice of engaging with that ambiguity or that newness that each situation really is.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems to me, and this is coming to me as I'm talking to you. So this may be inarticulate, but it seems to me that, and I'm thinking now in terms of words, concepts, that we treat them as sort of these self-contained entities that once we say the word um, chaos, it means we already know what it means. Or once we say the word light or water, we already know what that means in its totality. And now it's a fixed object that we can then put into our list of words that we're going to use, because everybody knows what those words mean. And I'm coming to the conclusion that because we see those as fixed concepts, that we have lost our ability for those concepts to have a life, a living life of their own.
Which is absolutely gorgeous. This aligns with one of my current investigations. I'm hosting weekly groups where they last about 75 minutes. There's two 10-minute periods of deliberate silence in them. So I pose a question and then I ask people to just contemplate the question, or even just observe your own experience in the silence while there's, 10 other people on the screen in silence with you. And obviously that can be a bit jarring at
Yeah.
first because we're not used to deliberate silence. But the thing I also say is we're not here to share our life stories. So if you have let's say we've done them on different words like soul, love, intuition, home, and also the word work. And the reason why I say to people is please don't just go with, like, if you've written something on work, don't just show up to this meeting and recite a paragraph from what you've just written. Like, see what actually emerges in the silence and then share that with us.
Right.
And the idea really is well, it's amazing what can happen when people are in this state where they're just sharing their own direct experience rather than the concepts that they've pre-formulated or that they've trodden out many, many times. Because I think there's something you said there about, like, we either trap or almost like deaden the concept with the word once we've said, no, this word means that. And what I've noticed with certain words that we use so frequently in life, when you actually have to ponder it for a little bit longer, it suddenly becomes its own living thing again. And it becomes a bit vague as to what it means. And it's funny, even in the groups, work was the word that we used last week to explore. And ironically, given that seemed the most tangible word out of love, soul, or intuition or belonging, there was more confusion around what work meant to people after 75 minutes than any of the other terms, which you might think could be a bit more ambiguous. So I think, yeah, I really like this idea that we've kind of these labels that we put on things, if we don't give them a chance to breathe, it kind of makes sense that our relationships don't have the same vitality or the same kind of spontaneity. And you hear people mention that, like, I think you even just see it when you engage with people these days. And it's a generalization I'm making here, but we're careful about what we say. We're trying to sound smart. We're repeating things we've said many times. And I've noticed this thing. I'm not sure, maybe this is something you've seen as well, but sometimes somebody could share something with me that's quite a vulnerable story. Like, they could be sharing something that's like a big event that happened in their life and they could have been quite sad about it. And yet I feel very little when they've told me because there's just something in the way they're telling it that I can gather that this is about the 50th or 100th time they've told somebody about it. And now I'm left with this exchange where I'm like, I don't know how to react to this, to be honest, because I don't feel emotionally involved in this story. Um, Whereas in these groups that I've set up, or even just in other conversations that I have, even this conversation now, when you're saying this is just emerging to me now, when somebody's engaging with me like that, I feel very alive. Like the feeling of aliveness almost stems from the relationship or the relation in which we're engaging with each other. Whereas I don't know, I think we've become in our desire maybe to look polished or to look clever or to not make mistakes or to seem certain, we're losing some of that liveliness or aliveness in our relationships as well.
How long have you been on this path? I'm not.
Yeah. I don't know how to
This is the
describe it.
path that you're on, and how did it start, and how long is it? And what are there milestones along this path that you've experienced?
Yeah, and I'll try and not do what I said about sharing something repeatedly in a in a
But I
way.
think you're going to say something different than you normally say because
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I'll
asking it in
definitely.
a different way. I'm not
Yeah.
asking you.
No, I definitely will share what's coming up for sure. The simplest way is to describe it, I guess. I had a 15-year career in finance, in capital markets and helping companies raise capital and this kind of thing. Um, Really good things were happening in that towards the end of my time in that. But a couple of years prior to me leaving that field, I saw a therapist for the first time when I lived in London when I was around 31 or so. Like, it had become apparent to me that, look, there were certain ways of my behavior I couldn't understand about myself. I didn't enjoy who I was becoming, so I explored that.
Huh?
Then that brought me to meditation and journaling and reading certain psychology and philosophy, which led me to taking a sabbatical in India where I met my German wife, as I mentioned. Then I got offered something back in finance. A CEO that I used to work with in Canada offered me just something out of the blue, out of the ordinary, which I said to Ifa, look, if we do this for a short period of time, that will give us the freedom to figure out what we want to do. Because I knew after I'd got into so many of these things, I was like, oh wow, I'm really excited about all this stuff. And the reason why I left finance, really, it wasn't that I hated it all, or that things weren't going in a good direction. Like the company I worked with in the last year, we got to ring the bell at the New York Stock Exchange. People were saying, "Oh, you're doing well," um, but I was around some people that I thought loved what they did. Like even though I didn't necessarily love it, but they loved it. So I never had imposter syndrome from the point of view that I didn't think that I could do a job. And to that point, I was offered another job, which offered me a 40% increase. And the weekend before I was supposed to start that, I was laying on my bed doing a body scan. My wife was still in Germany after Christmas. It was early January, I was supposed to start. And I just felt something in my chest. Like I just felt a very clear sign from my body that said, look, you came back to do what you came here to do. You have the freedom now to explore new ideas or space and time. Go do it, or else you're just going to suffer. And so I quit that pretty much on the first day. My wife and I then just said, what would we do? We said we'd go to the countryside in Peru. I had a friend down there who recommended it. We just booked a one-way ticket. And really, it's probably a continuation of what I tried to do then, but I said I wanted to create the stillness and the quiet to hear what I wanted to do next, which, you know, sounded crazy to a lot of my friends, I think, who saw me in a finance role. But I don't know, the more I've sat with myself and got comfortable with even things that other people could consider flaws about themselves or things that they don't like, I've built up a huge amount of trust in myself, or trust even in an unfolding. And that's come about by a bunch of different lines of inquiry, curiosities, connection to, I don't know, the environment, the nature around us. Perhaps even, although I'd struggle to define what I mean by that, but even a relationship with God, like just there's something in this life which I feel I've connected to, which makes me feel very at home in this world. And so then after we spent some time in Peru, we came to Germany, um, came to Berlin, and once again, my wife asked me, or said to me, I'd like to go back to Northern Europe. I said, cool. And she goes, how about Berlin? I said, fine. And I'm not saying that I make all my decisions in such a kind of haphazard manner, but I don't know, there's some way I'm operating from that just makes me feel pretty okay with whatever's coming next. And then did a coaching diploma while in Berlin. It was okay. Started a project then as well, though, around interviewing all these people around what is a good life. Initially, I did 120 interviews with no idea what the project would be. An executive director who took part in one of those interviews asked me, could I build a program around building trust and communication? So I went into a multinational, interviewed people individually and brought people together to discuss things in groups. And it was really about genuine kind of emergent conversation and kind of building trust and relationships that way. Um, since then, Ed, like I've turned the What is a Good Life thing into a podcast as well. I've got to meet really, really fascinating people that other things have sprouted up from, like collaborations and things like that.
Mhm.
And then also it just kind of widens the aperture of my own thinking, or the lens through which I'm looking at things, hearing other people's interpretations and exposing myself to new ideas. And then also even now, just I've become more fascinated in the weekly groups that I'm doing. I'm looking to build this into a course as well, but where people engage more with silence. Because I think, and there's also somebody that I'll be setting up silent retreats with later this year as well. Um, so these things are just kind of happening, and in the meantime, I've had a child as well, and lots of people have told me at different times, "Oh, wait till such and such a responsibility comes knocking on your door, you might change your approach then." And to be honest, it only reaffirms or reassures me, because I think a large kind of acknowledgement or unknown or uncertainty makes me feel a lot more relaxed in being a parent.
Mhm.
You know, like I'm not looking to what her life will be, my daughter's life will be in 10 years' time. I'm more concerned about being present and paying her attention now. And then what will be once I have those elements. And I think that's kind of how I'm approaching life. If I feel I'm paying attention to the present moment, and that's not that I'm living in some sort of I'm always present. And of course I get pulled in different directions and you can feel different things. But I have a confidence that if I pay attention to things, I have a trust in myself because I feel I've got to meet myself enough. And I feel I'm pretty comfortable in acknowledging my flaws, um, owning up to those to other people as well. And when I do all of that, I don't know, life just seems to be okay. Like, you know, I can enjoy life. Whether that's a stressful day, whether that's just a gloriously enjoyable day with my family, whatever it may be, it life seems to be okay to me.
Mhm. I um I have found that when we release our sense of obligation to the expectations of others,
Hmm.
that we're we are thrust into a conflicted state of opportunity and also of isolation,
Yes.
and we have to learn to deal with that, and we deal with that by being open to what approaches us. So I grew up in a Christian family. I ended up becoming a Presbyterian minister, um, but I always had a love hate relationship with the institution of the church. But I had a very strong sense of God's presence.
Hmm.
But I couldn't commoditize that. I couldn't define that as a certain thing. Oh, God does this. It's more like God is always approaching me, always. And the things that he approaches me with are people or situations. And I came to this conclusion early. I mean, I was 17 when I had this kind of awakening. That's the right word. I don't know if it's the right word, but let's just call it awakening, where I realized that God was real. Okay, if God is real, then that's the encompassing thing of all that exists. And so I just pray, if God you exist, then you have my life. I'll do whatever you want me to do. And I didn't know what that meant. I mean, I'm 17. I'm not even in college yet. It's kind of a young adolescent thing, but it wasn't. It was a very adult decision on my part because I realized that if I did that, it would take me into all kinds of different places, and it ignited in me something that had always been there, which was this desire for discovery and adventure and curiosity. I mean, I was a child that always was out in exploring things, and so all these things came to me, and I took them in, and I said, "Oh, that was interesting. I put it aside. Oh, that's interesting. I put that aside. Oh, I'm going to take this with me." So there's certain things that have stuck in. God, that's an awful word. Have stayed with me since I was 17, which is now 50, um, 53 years. Now what I have discovered with that is that our human desire to explain things ends up marginalizing the experience that we have. And so
Yeah, yeah.
we institutionalize things. Okay, I'm gonna create and I'm apologizing to every person who has done this because I'm not suggesting that you're insincere into this, but I'm going to create a program on meditation. So we're going to learn to do meditation. Well, that's not the point, is it? It's the point is to be meditative in relationship to the world around you, you know, but
Mm.
that's, but we market that as a thing. We're going to learn how to do meditation in quotes. I, I think what you and I are talking about is the sense that we're being released from a lot of the complications that came with the age of enlightenment, where everything got commoditized, everything became a product, everything became some kind of thing, some mechanism within a larger machine. And we're finding that those no longer works. So what is it we're going to find as we move forward? What do you think? Where do you think this all ends up? Where are we gonna be in 10 years or 50 years or
You know, I've I always like to take things from the micro and kind of extrapolate that onto the macro in a
yeah.
way. And what makes me remain optimistic about humans, like, so if we take the story of let's say the development of single cell life, like whatever anyone's beliefs is around how life has come to be, I think there's lots of question marks no matter what route you go. It's the Big Bang, what happened before the Big Bang? You know, and I don't view God and the Big Bang in conflict with each other either. And then so I have questions even around,
Same here.
you know, if you know, I have things that I sometimes mull over, like if God was already experiencing bliss, then why would God have created us? Like, or you know, or what was the motivation? Like, and look, it's not for things that I have an answer for, but they're just fun to kind of mull over at times. But the reason why I mentioned the, let's say, single cell life development from the primordial soup or primordial puddle to see what everything has become to this point,
Mhm.
like it's pretty staggering. Like, you know, I don't even have to look at the screen. I could just look at my hand and go, wow, like what the hell is that? Like if we've come from here. So look, whether people think we need a miracle to evolve from where we are right now, well, whatever way you want to categorize the word miracle, there's been some pretty astounding developments that have happened in the history of this planet. So when it comes to an individual human, if I look at my own experience, but also the experience of many others as well, it's invariably suffering that brings us to a point of reflection. Like,
Mhm.
I look, ideally, we could all have enlightened moments and have revelations without
Yeah.
suffering, but suffering seems to be a regular enough companion to it. I interviewed someone actually last week, and we kind of described suffering. If we could see it as a teacher, I wonder how that might change our experience with the direct experience of what's occurring. So I think that we're probably going to continue on this path, you know, getting maybe even more obsessed with maybe possessions, thinking that certain things are going to make us feel better about our lives. We're going to get into a more hyperly stimulated and over reliance on immediate dopamine hits from technology. Um, and then I think we're probably going to come to a place where it's going to start to look pretty irrefutable that the myth or the story that we're following no longer works really.
Uh-huh.
And you know, you touched on it there in this lovely way of, you know, when you're released from the ideas or the expectations and the obligations other people have for you. Like, I don't think we're always looking for the finality, I guess, so the end of the story to say this is why it was worth it. But I think just a life lived when it isn't kind of, I don't know, like at the whim of other people's or expectations or obligations, that in itself is a glorious experience. Now, once again, struggle, pressure, frustration, all of these things conflict can all still exist within that. But there's a different experience of this life. I think there's more of a sense of aliveness or adventure. Um, and so I'd probably imagine that we'll continue to suffer until, look, if we look at the trends in society, whether it's coming from the perspective of mental health, whether it's coming from the perspective of just general health and obesity, and I'm not judging obesity any, I think obesity is occurring because a lot of people are very uncomfortable with
Right.
the the story that we're following right now. And I think people are just clenching on even harder to that idea right now because times are starting to now, it's become more and more apparent that now things are looking very uncertain. Like, we had the experience even with COVID and what that brought people, like whether that was a more of a present sense of engaging, or, it was an unavoidable sense of death, even like contemplating death. Like we're all gonna have whatever your beliefs are for afterlife, or like where we go or what occurs, or if we don't go anywhere, death was in the air. And it wasn't, we had to sit in silence a lot of times or separate from each other in our own homes without the usual distractions we had. Like, so I think I view ourselves right now as living in a hyper stimulated and distracted existence, um, which makes the idea of slowing down and listening, it makes that harder to do.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we will be brought to more reflection points, just because the suffering, I think, on a trend, it's clear that it's already happening, it's already here. But I think it just, we require to be shaken enough again to maybe more collectively go, okay, we don't know the answers right now. And that would even be, I think, a far more liberating and therapeutic stance to take than doubling down on the ideologies that we're already holding that already aren't working. And that can be viewed politically, that can be viewed with any kind of dogmatic views we're holding on to. I think it would be refreshing. And I say this sometimes even from a leadership perspective, like it would be refreshing if some people said, look, this is our best guess for now. And started to treat people like adults, as opposed to viewing people as people that need to be told something with absolute certainty, like we do reading the same story to a child again. Like, there's something, I think, where we're not treating ourselves like adults, like both in our lack of accountability sometimes for our own actions, reactions, or like we're not taking accountability for reflecting on ourselves. We're pointing fingers at other people. And so that's it's for us to behave more like adults, and then it's also for leaders to, I don't know, to let go, maybe even once again, of the obligations perhaps they feel from people that are following them or that are projecting something onto them that says you have to have the answer. Because I've noticed in some conversations or groups that I've been a part of, sometimes it's just really nice to all acknowledge that, wow, this is ambiguous and we don't have the answers right now. But we're all here in a group acknowledging that we don't have the answers. And that's very refreshing as well.
If we had the answers, would we know what to do with them?
Yeah, well, it's funny, you
Hurry
mentioned,
to implement them.
yeah, yeah. So, you mentioned meditation there, and I think there's a big problem sometimes, even just where people are coming up with answers and telling us what these interventions are going to look like before you even embarked upon it, or what your life's going to look like. And I'm like, man, I started meditating and I ended up quitting my job and throwing myself into uncertainty. I'm not making it all sound so linear. But sometimes I wonder, would I recommend my own life path on my worst enemy? Like, just in terms of the amount of uncertainty that I have to engage with. It works for me, but it's not an answer for everyone. But sometimes I think we're looking for all these new ways of coming up with answers. But like, whether it's the Bible, whether it's the latest psychological studies, whether it's just our own direct experience of life, we all know that we feel better if we do something for somebody else. Now,
Yeah.
does that mean that everyone is just going out and just serving other people? No. We all know that our lives would be better if we consumed less technology. We all know that, I'd even venture, if we just even drank an optimal amount of water in our days, for myself included, perhaps, that we might feel better. Like, I don't think the solution is even the interesting thing, because we live in relation to everything again. That's also a vibrant, pulsing, different thing, and I think it's just getting used to the fact that there are no 5 top tips that are going to save you. Like, it's not for our lack of information. That this is the age of information, right? Like, gee, like we've never had so much access to information, and
Right.
yet I don't see people, just making the right choices, or, in whatever way they want to categorize that, or I don't see us treating in ways in which is reflective of the information that we hold. So no, I think even if we had them, I don't think would be perhaps implementing them along with the way you were kind of suggesting there.
Well, I think maybe, I mean, this is, I'm going to use this podcast as an example of something that I tried and found that it was something other than, not so much that I intended, but just what I thought it would be. So I thought it was time to do a podcast. And so I wanted to make it easy for people to say yes, meaning I didn't want to make it complicated. I didn't want to, we didn't want them to have to promote something. Didn't want them to have to prepare, some kind of questions. I didn't want any of that. I said, just give me an hour and we'll talk about whatever we want to talk about when we meet. And I just saw that as a simple solution to getting people to sign up for a podcast. Well, what I discovered is that, and I think this is what we're talking about, is that what people liked about it was an unscripted conversation that didn't have a purpose to it or a point, or it was trying to figure out something. It was just, well, we're going to have a conversation. We're going to talk about, with one of the guys that was on last year, part of the time we talked about manga and anime and graphic novels and Japanese graphic novels. And oh, this is great. I mean, I love doing that. But that's so random. It's so random. But maybe life is random in that way. But we find the beauty and the mystery and the value of it in its randomness, because then we're making connections. It's like a big puzzle, I think. And it's, I wouldn't trade this for anything. I'm so, at my age, I'm 7. I am so happy to be living in this time of the world, because there is so much change happening. I remember the way it used to be, before computers, before smartphones, before the internet. I remember what it was like, and I loved it. I'm not really a modern person. I'm a pre-modern person, but I see what is possible, another 50 years or 75 years down the road. I see what it can be at the turn of the next century. And I know I won't be around for that, but just to imagine that and to see that scope of time and the massive changes that have taken place, I'm very pleased with that. And so,
What do you what do you see at the turn of the century, just out of
oh,
curiosity?
well, I've said this for over 20 years. I see that we're going to witness the end of industrial institutions.
Hmm.
We're going to see a re an emptying of performance and power hierarchies, because we don't need them anymore, because there will be networks that will replace them. And these networks are essentially communities where we talk with each other and we figure out what do we need in the direct interaction that we have as people. And we find that we'll become it's not that we will become less global, but we'll become more focused on how can I make a difference in my local community. I see that's what's coming, because the large institutions are all globally focused, and they demand that we become globally focused, which is really a way of emptying us of our power, and I would say even our free will.
Oh, that's I've never heard it put like that, but that is literally what happens, right? Like we we start to focus on all the global problems, and then of course I start thinking, oh, little old me trying to,
Right.
figure out massive, massive issues. There was something I started doing when I came to Germany. So we had moved from the countryside in Peru, where whenever I walk, we live in the countryside, so it's 15-minute maybe walk into the local rural town. When I walked in there, everyone would always just say, like, along the pathway would say, like, buenos dias, buenas tardes, like, just some greeting for the day, the time of day it was, and they'd look you in the eye. And
Yep.
I absolutely loved that. And so I got to Berlin, this big city, and when we found the place that we were going to stay in and became our local community, I sent if like I just really missed that. And of course, look, I'm not going to generalize too much. I've a German family here. I'm very much enjoying living in Berlin, but Germans also aren't known as the most instantly friendly to just chit chat, like, or to engage that kind of way. But what I noticed was I consistently said Guten Morgen, Guten Abend, Hallo, Moin, whatever the expression was, consistently to everyone in my neighborhood. Not everyone, that's too much, but when I'm walking the dog, when I'm going to the supermarket, just a hello, like, and when I kept on doing it to people, initially I may have got tumbleweed and actually, what's this weird guy saying hello to everyone for? What does he want?
That
Um,
accent.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's that accent. Yeah.
And but even in my coffee shop as well, and it's become a point now where when some people come visit me even from a different part of the town, or even my family come visit me in Berlin, they're making jokes that I'm the mayor of the area or whatever it may be, because I'm shaking hands and
That's
saying
great.
hello to so many people. And when you mentioned there, like, I think there's certain things that we're looking for, really, we're contemplating really big problems all the time, and we're not just looking at our local community then, like, or things that we could do in our immediate surroundings that would have a profound impact on our lives. Now, maybe I've become overly simplistic as a human being and what I get gratification from. But I can promise you, like, on any given day, the fact that people will say hello to me, even if I've ever ended up knowing them, even if they just stay as someone who will wave and smile at me in the morning, and I've never had a conversation with them, but they do that with me now, that fills me up, like, beyond so many things that I would have thought would have filled me up before. Like, there could have been achievements that I thought that I was chasing, and I'm not to say that, like, achievements and, but, like, if you fulfill a desire of yours or something, go for it. Like, I'm not saying any of that, but I would struggle to think of something that sounds so simple that has such a profound effect on my, just even how I engage with the world, even what it says about what I think about the world. Like, I think it was Einstein who said something along the lines of, like, one of the most fundamental decisions a human being can make is whether they see the world or the universe as a hostile or a friendly place. Just by doing that in my local neighborhood, that is a huge difference. Now, I could sit here in my home and just pontificate over how do I solve the world's biggest problems and basically do nothing about it other than read lots of things. Or I could do something really quite simple in my local neighborhood. And, I'm sure that that has a good effect on other people too. That someone will say that to them, or what the knock-on effects of that could be. Because, like, I think the world's an amazing place. I know I mentioned all these trends that look to be going quite negative, but that's fine. Like, life is, there's rarely a golden age to look back on where there wasn't something going on in the world that you're like, whoa, is that really a golden age? Um, but I think there's an immense amount of opportunity. And as you say, the rate of change that's occurring right now, like, that's I think when you're not holding on to things, that's a stunning thing to be a part of as well.
What's interesting is what is interesting are the people who see it differently, who are recognized as experts, and they see that this sort of thing is not happening. It's not happening. But there is something, and I actually think that the negative things, the crisis things, the things that are leading to some kind of destructive end, are absolutely necessary, because they're pointing to the fact that we're going to go through a transition, and there's something that will emerge from the ashes of that tragedy that will lead us into a better world. So I,
Mm.
I think it's cyclical. It's not linear. It's cyclical. And
Yeah.
so, as I think about, I've said this to people. It says, well, let's get on with the destruction so we can get on with the recovery.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
It's
People don't like that because they're tied in so much to the system as it exists, that their security is there and their money is there and their livelihood is there. And oh, I understand all of that. But the reality is that for a lot of people, that's not going to be there in 5, 10 years.
Yeah, and that's like incredibly confronting for people, right? Like
Yeah.
on one hand, and some people want to tell you it's inevitable, and then you say, okay, let's speed it up. Then they'll say, well, no, you're missing the point. But um, like there's something I heard a gentleman that I interviewed actually on the podcast called Bio Akomalefe, and he's a Nigerian philosopher and really fascinating thinker. And he said something, I'm paraphrasing here, but what if part of the crisis is how we're responding to the crisis?
Yeah.
And and he
Mhm.
also has an expression called was it the times are urgent, we need to slow down. And he's not like and there's certain things with that which I think were the very mindsets that have created the problems are the mindsets that we're trying to figure out the problems from. And I really think there's a big invitation going on now to drop how you perceive the world, to investigate the models that you hold, the lenses through which you view the world. Because look, surely collectively, and I'm not saying like we're all complicit in this in some way, so I'm not pointing fingers at
Oh
anyone.
yeah,
Like,
yeah. Yeah, we're all.
yeah, yeah,
It's very
but
true.
like can we just start to really like view this as an invitation to really let go, um and to go into the unknown, like to engage in conversations where we're like, well, I don't know. You know, when you mentioned words that are, earlier, that you can put these words into bricks and you can put them into a wall. Like, I also think that there's words that we don't use, like soul and love, like that we,
Yeah.
initially when I interviewed 120 people around that question of what is a good life, I was stunned that in the first 120 interviews, when people asked me what was the most interesting thing that I found, I think I saw that it was around maybe 15% of interviews, people used the word love explicitly. Now, and of course, it was implicitly inferred by suggesting family, friends, all of these things. But just the fact that the word wasn't explicitly said, I found very interesting. And when it comes to a word even like soul, there's certain words that we're staying away from. I've read books on soul. I've interviewed people around soul. I've written about it. I don't even know how to describe it. Do you know what I mean? Like it's
Yeah. Well,
and even when I do think I've got a very clear handle on the description, something else kind of wriggles around with it. Like the word in itself feels alive to me. And so I think that we've become a little bit too reductive with our language, with our inquiries, with our investigations. And I think just holding them a little bit more lightly um, could give us space to breathe, could give us space to think differently, to engage differently, to not be so tense with what we're already holding on to.
yeah. We're coming to the end of our time, and so what I would like to hear from you, there will be people who will be watching this who won't understand what we're talking about. Okay, and I'd like for us to leave something for them, which says, if you don't understand this, if this seems foreign to you, here's some first step to take to try to imagine that there's a larger world out there for you. So what would you suggest, a kind of a first step for people who have yet to step into this kind of journey of discovery or awakeness or whatever we call it?
Yeah, you know, I was initially thinking of even some books that I've read. And so if I were to look at books that had a seminal kind of impact in how I was perceiving the world, I'd say, and I'm not going to finish with I know this wasn't the question, so I'm not going to finish with recommendations for books, but Eckhart Tolle's New Earth I found very interesting from a point of view of just identifying the ego. Um, I really enjoy The Order of Time by Carlo Rovelli, an Italian physicist. Um, and I think even that book on chaos theory, like I think it's all around us. Like it's just a question if you're willing to look at it and to sit with it. And so what I would say is like periods of silence. Now, this may sound and this probably puts me more in an island than if you were saying to relate to people. But I think if you sit in silence, and I don't even mean meditation, but just if you sit and observe just what's going on in your body, like so this could just even be a 10-minute exercise of just observing what's happening in your body, the fluctuations, the transience of your thoughts, your emotions.
Sure.
This is the reality of our nature. And it's very, very changeable. And then I think when you can start to wrap around even some, because then the intellect needs explanations of things as well. And I even think like investigations into certain things like that, like certain layman stuff for quantum physics, certain things for perhaps even just acknowledging more of what we don't know. I think this kind of becomes inevitable. I think it becomes inevitable once you stop and pause for certain periods of time.
I think that's a great idea. I think, and if nothing more, it allows your heart to slow down and your mind to find some rest, and you begin to discover that there is a lot of things coming to you that are worth recognizing.
Yeah, I love the expression you said earlier. God is always approaching me,
Mm-hmm.
and whatever word that people feel good about using, like there's something about that expression that says to me that we can trust nature, we can trust our own nature, we can trust ourselves, um, and that there's always something coming. There's always a new opportunity. There's always something like well, for every time there's a decision that's made, that means there's probably a few things eliminated. So that means there was something to decide. So there was uncertainty. So I think just the very nature of it, the thing that I think that we're trying to avoid the most is uncertainty. And yet conversely for me, that's what's brought me my greatest sense of aliveness.
So I mean, earlier, it was last week. There was I think it was David Ross who from Australia who posted something about Heisenberg's uncertainty theory, and I added to it Gödel's in incompleteness theorems. But these are not just kind of random ideas. These are kind of fundamental notions of the world that um, is incomplete and uncertain, but that only means that it's developing and it's expanding, and and we are part of that, and the and the and the joy and the love of discovering the beauty of all that exists is is maybe the antidote to all the fear of what is coming, and if you can discover that, then you've got something to share with the people that you love.
All I'll say to that is amen. That's that resonates 100%.
And I think that that's what is happening. I think that's happening in a lot of places. So, well, I'm grateful for the work that you're doing, and I look to hear about more of this. I know that you and I are going to be a part of a group that's going to have some conversations coming up soon, and I'm glad you're doing what you're doing, because I think you're going to have an impact upon a lot of people merely because you're just asking the questions and you're not not portraying yourself as the expert. You're a fellow traveler, as they say.
Yes, that's a very astute description, I would say.
And I would suggest to you all who are watching and listening that you join us in this journey. Don't feel like there's a destination that you have to pick, but just that the journey is really where the learning and the experience comes from. And and if you're interested, I mean, if you want more, if you want to learn more, get in touch with Mark, get in touch with me. I mean, this is what we do. We have these conversations, and we help people to discover something about themselves that the mechanism of the world will never be able to show you. And yet the relationships that we have with one another is where those things get discovered. So thank you for watching, and be in touch. hit the like button, subscribe if you want, and we'll keep having these conversations. This is an interesting thing, Mark. So when I started this a little over a year ago, I was going to do interviews with people who had been introduced to me, and that was a wide spectrum of people. And increasingly, the themes, common themes that are emerging, but they're not coming from the same people, the same introductions. There's a kind of a something larger taking place that we can't put our hands on, it and hold on to it and commoditize it, but it's still happening, and it's going to have an effect upon us. And you who are watching and listening are a part of that. And if you have something to say, then please share it in the comments, because it does matter, and I appreciate it. So thank you again, Mark, and we'll see you soon, and we'll see you all soon here on the Eddy Network podcast. Bye-bye.